Let's watch a couple of Fox News clips that really help shed light on some of the immigration plans from the Trump administration, as these are clips of the Trump border czar himself, Tom Homan, in an interview making some points that I think will ring rather true rather quickly as we transition. So let's jump right into this and we'll be back with the fact checks and context.
Biden and Harris really were the first administration in a long time who didn't make moves to secure the border. In just the remaining seconds we have, can you tell the audience why that would be? What commander-in-chief, what president and vice president would take steps that don't secure a border? Why?
He was the first president in history of the nation who came in and unsecured a border on purpose, not because of mismanagement, not because of incompetence, by design. They want this open border. They obviously think these millions of people will be future Democratic voters, but also he overturned the Trump census rule, which millions of people in sanctuary cities recounted the next census. And what does that mean? More seats in House for the Dems. But I tell you what, the Trump team coming to town, we're going to take control January 20th, and people are going to be held accountable. We're going to be very transparent. We're going to get behind. What did the United Nations have to do with this open border crisis? Who in the administration, the Biden administration, opened the doors on this humanitarian crisis? What NGOs were involved in this? We're going to be very transparent to American people, and we're going to tell them the truth, what happened on this border. Again, by design.
This idea that Biden opened the border is such insane cope that is predicated off Republicans, MAGA's inability to admit that Trump never secured the border in his first term. If we could deal with reality, these kinds of talking points would never happen, but MAGA decided lying was easier. Border crossings spiked twice under Trump, way higher than they were previously, like under Obama, right? They doubled in 2019 to almost 1 million and then doubled again at the end of 2020 and kept going up to where he then handed that over to Biden in the middle of a spike when it was higher than it had been at any point in his presidency. So in terms of crossings, the heightened levels of crossings began under the Trump administration. Biden didn't have to open the door for anything. That right there destroys the talking point. And if anything, he tried to close it. He and the Democrats tried to pass the U.S. Citizenships Act of 2021 his very first week in office. This would have increased funding at the border, had more agents, more money for judges for asylum claims so they weren't getting backed up, advanced technology for fentanyl, and Republicans shot this down because they were upset about Remain in Mexico. He tried again to pass legislation in 2023, and we all know how that turned out, right? Republicans famously shot it down at Trump's direction so Trump could run on it. But yeah, let's just instead pretend that the border was secure as possible under Trump. Let's pretend that it never spiked under Trump. It never spiked with Remain in Mexico and then just exploded out of nowhere with Biden because Biden came in and undid all these Trump things, even though we can't name a single policy other than Remain in Mexico that Biden undid that was Trump's. And I mean, it's as if the border hasn't been a discussion for 2 decades now. Like MAGA takes these campaign, election year talking points and just believes them as the truth and not as something people are just like exacerbating to run on.
And if they don't want to help, instead decide don't help, fine, don't help, but don't get in our way. And I've said this for the past week over and over again. Do not harbor and conceal an illegal alien, knowingly harbor and conceal an illegal alien from us because it's a crime. Don't impede us because it's a crime. Don't obstruct because it's a crime. If you want to sit aside and let us do your job of securing the communities, fine, we'll do that. But don't cross that line.
This part is kind of funny because when we talk about like women's reproductive rights or I don't know, slavery, Republicans, MAGA are quick to be like, the states should have the right to decide. It should be up to the states and all this nonsense. It's the same with guns, right? Like this is a state's right. The federal government shouldn't impede on the state's right to decide. But then some states are like, okay, but so we're going to do sanctuary cities then. Like we don't mind undocumented immigrants and that's our right as a state, correct? And the right is like, oh my God, they're not American. We have to attack them and we have to take away all of their funding and we have to sue them and all of this stuff. I mean, we have to send in the National Guard and this kind of insane kind of talking points. I mean, imagine if Biden went as far just to stop subsidizing red states who made abortion illegal. The outcry of the right would be crazy, the tyranny of the majority and all of this, and they're oppressing us and not letting us have our beliefs, and this is supposed to be a democracy, and da-da-da-da-da. But when it's something that they don't like, They're all for it. And as for him leaving a humanitarian disaster for Trump and again, circling back to, Biden opened the border, I really want to drill in on this again. I pulled this up because people always say this. They're like, oh, Biden reversed Trump's policies and that's why border crossing spiked. And I'm convinced that people who say this have no idea what they're talking about. So I just wanted to go over this quickly, right? The things that Biden overturned when he came into office. The first thing, he freeze funding for the wall. The wall had only had 56 miles built, and Mexico did not pay a dime for it like Trump had promised. It had been stymied in terms of progress before Biden had came into office. Walls also historically have never stopped immigration. There's no data that of what was built lowered immigration in that area. So again, this is no big deal. There's nothing you can point to with this that says, hey, this led to more immigration. There's nothing you can point to that would even say if Trump had built the entire wall that it would have stopped immigration. It was a waste of money and a silly thing to think anyway. He overturned Remain in Mexico. Like I said, this the big one, right? The one bill, but this is something that's often overinflated by MAGA, to try to give Trump another win that he doesn't deserve is really why, because they'll act like this is a major bill that secured the border when it really didn't. It was enacted in 2018. The first year it was enacted, when it was fully in works, and this is the policy and what they were doing in its very first year, border crossings doubled to almost 1 million. They went higher to where they had been during Trump's entire presidency, higher than where they were under Obama. COVID then came in and saved it for about 6 months. There were no border crossings because, nobody was leaving their countries. And then the last 4 to 5 months of Trump's presidency, border crossings spiked back up to 1 million and were continuing to climb higher and higher, and obviously did keep climbing under Biden. So it clearly secured nothing. Overturning it wouldn't have changed anything if they were already spiking under it. You can't make the argument that overturning that opened the border, right? He overturned the PACR and the HARP, which, long story short, are the things that made asylum harder, right? Which he overturned this after Inspector General reports found problems in these with the way that those seeking asylum weren't able to get their due process with things like access to counsel, the conditions of the facility, how they were treated before and after. Trump had asylum agreements in place with the Northern Triangle countries, like Guatemala and the three northern. It's the ones that Kamala was appointed to deal with, where migrants would have to seek asylum in those countries rather than seek asylum here. During the implementation of these, the 0 migrants successfully received asylum in the one country it was actually applied in. It was only applied in Guatemala, actually. And yeah, it was no migrants successfully received their asylum and then came to America. So Biden overturned this for being ineffective. And again, this isn't something you would point to and be like, this would lead to massive border spike crossings. This isn't something that would open or close the border. So this can't be it also. And then Biden obviously overturned for being ineffective, and then infamously appointed Kamala Harris to find the root causes of migration from the Northern Triangle countries, where migration from those countries dropped after she redirected aid and resources to them. So overturning them and doing it his way obviously led to the decrease in migration. So it was the right thing to do. So if anything, it was working the opposite. That's not opening the border. And the only other thing is Trump had some minor regulations that he signed pretty much to restrict asylum even more, up the standards. And these were actually overturned by the courts before Biden took office. So they weren't by Biden. And if anything, it would be technically still Trump's DOJ. And then he actually went out of his way to save 2 of Trump's regulations when he was in office. So when we look at it, it seems that nothing Biden overturned opened the border. Remain in Mexico is the only thing of any significance that actually had anything to do with the straight up the border and border crossings. And we know that border crossings spiked twice while it was in place. Plus, the only thing it changed is what country you were in to seek asylum, where again, if border crossings were spiking during Trump's final months when it was still in place, if it spiked in 2019 when it was still in place, we know for a fact it didn't secure anything. So removing it doesn't change the trend or trajectory of anything. And had Republicans just actually legislated and played ball the way the government is supposed to, we would have had replacement legislation Biden's very first week, the U.S. Citizenship Act of 2021, that actually addressed the issues with our system, had money for the border and for asylum and for work visas and for everything we needed. And it's funny because Biden then does an executive order on the border after saying, hey, we need to do this through Congress acting like they're going to play ball, then deciding not to. And through his executive order that he finally does, levels drop lower than what Trump had them at when he left office. And now the talking point is, well, one, Biden waited too long, even though he was trying to literally set precedents that like, hey, we should do these things as Congress. Also, like, if I do it as executive order, like Supreme Court can look at it. Like, obviously the next president can overturn it. Like it's a lot more efficient if Congress gets it done. But then it's like, oh, he finally put Trump's policies back. And I would love for anyone who believes this to name the specific Trump policy that was in Biden's executive order. Like, I would love to know, and make sure you're specific, right? Not something vague like, we secured the border, he closed the border. Like, no, like I want to know the specific thing, what bill or act it was in when Trump passed it. And then I want to know, like, where is it in Biden's executive order? Because that's kind of just hilarious cope.